I came back with stitches still fresh in my stomach and pain meds barely masking the ache, thinking I was returning to my life, my work, my team, my code. Instead, I walked into a betrayal so quiet it didn't need a knife. My desk was gone. My name stripped from Jira. My work, my identity, handed to a smiley intern like I was already dead. And in that moment, before the rage, before the war room, I made a promise to myself. They would regret making me feel disposable, not with screaming, with facts, with logs, with the kind of revenge that can't be undone. You know, the kind of silence that isn't quiet at all? The kind that buzzes with tension, like a wire stretched too tight, ready to snap the moment someone breathes wrong? That was the air when I stepped back into the office after surgery. 3 incisions on my lower abdomen, stitches still healing, and a head full of half-digested pain meds. But I showed up. I came in early with a reusable coffee cup in one hand and my badge in the other. What I wasn't prepared for was that I didn't have a desk anymore. It was just gone. No monitor, no keyboard, not even the dead spider plant Liv used to water when I forgot. My whole station stripped clean like I'd never been there, like someone hit the reset button on me while I was under anesthesia. I stood there, blinking at the empty rectangle of carpet where my chair had once left grooves. Then I looked up, and there she was, Kara. Bright-eyed, ponytail bouncing, practically vibrating with caffeine and imposter syndrome. "Morning," she chirped, sliding her AirPods out just long enough to wave. She was sitting at my desk. Correction, what used to be my desk. Before I could open my mouth, Dan's voice cut through the air like a buzzsaw. "Park yourself on the bench, hero," he said without even turning around. "You're not pushing to prod. Don't make your sick leave our problem." I felt the breath catch in my chest, not from the staples in my gut, but from the slap of dismissal. He didn't even stand, just spun in his chair, half sipping from a Yeti tumbler while Slack notifications pinged behind him. I stood still, just for a second. There's a kind of fury that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't slam doors or toss monitors. It just burns low and deep, down in your bones, until it finds something to hook into. Mine hooked into a red Jira ticket flashing across the monitors overhead. Critical, payment flow regression in 6.348. Estimated resolution time, 48 hours. Codebase, unstable. Deployment, blocked. And in that moment, with the cheap office lights buzzing above and the throb of incisions reminding me I wasn't even supposed to be standing yet, I clocked the risk. Payments. Version conflict. 2 things you never want to see sharing the same space as a critical release. My heart didn't race. My mind didn't scream. Instead, something inside me clicked. Quiet. Focused. I walked over to the bench, which wasn't a bench at all, just an overflow table near the kitchen, where half the chairs had one short leg and the Wi-Fi was spotty. I sat down, logged into my laptop, and opened Jira. Kara's name was plastered all over my epics. Work I'd scoped, diagrammed, pushed through stakeholder meetings, reassigned under her initials. I scrolled through the task list. Every line a familiar fingerprint, every branch traceable back to documentation I'd written. And yet, there she was, the new face of the project. It wasn't her fault, not entirely. She was just the intern who got handed a kingdom without asking why the crown was still warm. I toggled into Git, found 3 unreviewed merges, one of them already tagged for release. Unvalidated changes inside the payment processor module, 1 line deep in a deprecated library. A memory hit me like a jolt. 3 weeks ago, I flagged that same library as a potential risk, suggested a phased upgrade, even ran a dry patch in staging. Dan had said it wasn't a priority. Now that legacy code was bleeding errors across the pipeline, but no one was talking about that. No. The hallway chatter was louder. Grown-ups fixed it. I heard someone mutter by the Keurig machine. Try not to break it again. Then Dan's voice again, this time from his standing desk, broadcast clear across the floor. If this tanks, we say she barged in fresh off sick leave. I didn't move, didn't speak, just opened my notes app and started a new file, timeline.md. Every block, every quote, every denial from this moment forward, I'd record it. Not for therapy, not for HR, for the reckoning. I filed a restore access ticket through SecOps, standard protocol under the medical leave reintegration clause in our company policy. I cited the clause number, included medical clearance from my surgeon, attached the Slack thread from 2 months back where Dan had promised, nothing will shift while you're gone. Focus on healing. 12 minutes later, SecOps approved it. My access was restored. For now. I didn't send any emails, didn't ping anyone, just started crawling the logs. I pulled metrics from the last 2 sprints, pipeline stalls, branch failures, merge conflicts, risk deltas, and buried under the rubble. The root of the fire, a known CVE, common vulnerability exposure in the payment library, combined with a library mismatch from Kara's last push. It wasn't sabotage. It wasn't even gross negligence. It was inexperience, left to fester without oversight. But it was about to become my fault, unless I moved fast. I went back to Jira, tried to push a hotfix branch, denied. Dan had blocked my push rights manually. Until after release, the message said, no explanation, no warning, just a locked gate. So I pulled the timeline back up and started logging everything. 9:03 a.m. Dan blocked my push access, even though I had full medical clearance. 9:27 a.m. I found the vulnerability in the payments module, a known CVE we'd flagged months ago. 9:33 a.m. Kara's merge, number 114423, had introduced a mismatch that triggered it. 9:35 a.m. I caught Dan on Slack, basically saying if things go wrong, they'll blame me for showing up too early. I didn't plan revenge in that moment. Not yet. But I did recognize what was happening. They wanted me sidelined, conveniently quiet, erased, just enough to take the fall but not enough to defend myself. But I wasn't going to rage or flinch. I wasn't going to file complaints or yell in a meeting. I was going to build something else, something permanent, the kind of revenge no one can delete, the kind backed by logs, timestamps, hashes, and protocol. And it all started here, on a shitty folding chair by the microwave, with a cold cup of coffee and an empty desk that used to be mine. There's a specific kind of betrayal that doesn't show up in meetings or Slack threads. It lives in the metadata, buried in timestamps, Git logs, and the hushed click of keyboards that stop when you enter a room. That's where I started to find the truth. Quiet replacements, soft deletions. Work I'd led slowly peeling off my name like it had never been mine. It started with Jira. I opened the board that used to have my face next to every epic in the payments pipeline. Now, one by one, they were stamped with Kara's initials. Some still had my original descriptions, comments I'd written in full sentences like a real engineer, not the half-assed shorthand she used. But her name was everywhere: owner, reporter, lead dev. One ticket had been updated 3 hours ago. A CVE escalation I'd filed back in Q2, tied to an unpatched version of a crypto module. She'd marked it resolved with no linked merge, no test, no QA check, just closed and smiled away. Git was worse. Unreviewed merges from Kara's branch, 3, maybe 4 of them, into core modules, including payments and user session handling. I traced the diffs. No comments, no reviewers. Just quiet approvals from a dev named Dartprod. That account belonged to Dan. He'd given her a straight merge path. No oversight, no flags. And all while I was technically still active under protected medical leave. They hadn't just cut me out. They'd rewritten the map. Every time I loaded a new repo, the same pattern played out. Merges tied to epics that used to be mine. Code branches I'd opened with weeks of research and meetings, now buried beneath her commit messages like dirt over a shallow grave. But the worst part wasn't the theft. It was the theater. By lunch, I'd picked up enough fragments to see what they were staging. Dan had gambled on the intern to make the next release faster, cheaper, and more dynamic. If it succeeded, he'd have a flashy headline for the higher-ups. Agile pivot led by high-energy junior talent. Never mind that the same intern couldn't explain the difference between a merge conflict and a memory leak 2 months ago. And if it failed? He had me. The comeback story that crashed the pipeline. She came back early, wanted to contribute. We tried to stop her. I overheard that part near the hallway printer, Dan's voice, low but performative. If it tanks, we say she barged in fresh off sick leave. Couldn't wait. You know how some people are. The silence that followed wasn't agreement. It was complicity. I started to keep track. Not just code diffs or ticket IDs. I logged whispers, channel renames, Slack aliases. Even the time Dan untagged me from the release bridge invite and added Kara instead. She messaged, LOL, what is a release bridge? 5 minutes later. They were betting I'd walk away, that I'd swallow the insult and let it go, that I was still too stitched up and sedated to fight. But I'd been fighting my whole damn career. I opened a new section in my timeline file and titled it Substitution Patterns. Every time my name was swapped out, I documented it, noted who approved it, cross-referenced timestamps. I included screenshots, Slack excerpts, commit links, and Jira ticket numbers. I stored everything off-site, encrypted, hashed, versioned. If they were rewriting history, I was building a forensic map to drag it back. Kara pinged me that afternoon. Just a casual message. Hey, I think I broke something again. Can you help debug this payments thing? I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. Happy to help. Let's pair up. Screen share? She accepted. Her camera clicked on. High ponytail, bright smile. Behind her, the clutter of someone still half living in student housing. Ring light, laundry basket, acoustic guitar she definitely didn't know how to play. I watched her cursor jitter around the wrong module for 3 minutes. This looks like a rollback bug, she said. I did a hotfix earlier, but now I think, I don't know, it's not rolling back? I opened the deployment log. Her hotfix had skipped rollback hooks. She'd literally replaced the fail-safe mechanism with a sleep function. Yeah, I said slowly. That's not how rollback works. Mind if I take the wheel? Sure. I was just guessing anyway. I wrapped the change in a feature flag, restored the rollback logic, and patched the test suite to catch it next time. Quietly. Under my own fork. I didn't commit it to master. I didn't even tag it. But I saved a copy. Time-stamped. Signed. Ready. By 3 p.m., the whispers had turned into looks. Not openly hostile, just watchful. Dan walked past the bench twice, didn't say a word. But he checked my screen both times. The second time, he lingered. Taking initiative again, he said, voice even. Just cleaning up some missed hooks, I said. Be careful, he replied. You're not on the critical path anymore. Wouldn't want to confuse things. Right, I said. Wouldn't want to confuse ownership. He paused. That was the word he didn't want said aloud. Ownership. Because the moment you start tracking that, people get nervous. Suddenly, it's not just code. It's responsibility. And once you shine a light on who owns what, you also shine a light on who let it break. I opened the HR portal and filed a second support ticket. Request for role clarity during medical leave reassignment. Cited policy. Cited internal documentation. Attached screenshots of the transitions. Sent it directly to SecOps and Legal CC. By 5:17 p.m., I got the auto reply, escalated to compliance review. Expect follow-up within 48 hours. Good. The release deadline was 48 hours away. By the time it dropped, everything would be either fixed or traced back to the exact second it broke. Dan was right about one thing. I was taking initiative again. Just not the kind he could control. When you've been in tech long enough, you stop trusting people's words and start trusting systems. Logs don't lie. Metrics don't sugarcoat. And failure? Failure leaves fingerprints everywhere. So I stopped listening to what Dan said and started tracing the fire. The payments module was the epicenter. I knew that the moment I spotted the failed rollback. But the deeper I dug, the worse it got. By 7:14 a.m. the next morning, I was logged into the CI dashboard, alone in the office, with the smell of burnt coffee from the break room clinging to the air like regret. The test pipeline had stalled 4 times in the last 2 sprints. 2 of those failures had been quietly re-queued under admin override. No one had flagged them in Slack. No bug tickets. Just silently swept under the rug. But I was done pretending this was a miscommunication. I clicked through to the job history. The first stall correlated with a patch Kara had submitted for a performance tweak in the payment service. No code review, no A/B test. Just a raw merge with a note that said, "Should be faster now, LOL." It wasn't. It was slower and more brittle. She'd swapped out a trusted encryption helper function for a less secure one that looked simpler, but lacked compatibility with our legacy token structure. That's why rollback failed. The encryption was invalidating the rollback payload. Root cause found. But the moment I tried to submit a hotfix to restore the helper and patch the CVE, I hit a wall. Error. Push denied by admin override. Dan had locked me out again. I checked the audit log. There it was in black and white. Manual block at 6:52 a.m. User dartprod. Reason. Stability during release window. I opened my timeline file and logged the block. 6:52 a.m. Push writes manually disabled by Dan. No notice. No justification other than release stability. 7:14 a.m. Pipeline failure root cause traced to known CVE plus incompatible helper function in merge. $17423. I didn't just write it down. I took screenshots, exported logs, created local copies of every linked file, and tagged them with timestamps. If they wanted to erase me from the repo, fine, but they were never erasing the record. At 8:22 a.m., I walked over to QA. Liv sat at her station with 2 empty coffee cups and a grimace that told me she'd already seen the bug reports. "Got a minute?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Only if it's about the payments bug, because I've already sent 2 escalations and no one's answering. It's about that, and more." I showed her the chain, Kara's merge, the encryption helper swap, the failed rollback, and Dan's override. Her lips pressed into a line. "Jesus," she muttered. "And they said this release was locked in." "They're locking in a time bomb," I said, "unless we move fast." Liv leaned back in her chair. "What do you need?" "A clean regression test build, unfiltered logs, and someone who'll go on record if it all breaks." She nodded once. "You've got it." Next, DevOps. Marco had his headphones on, deep in log tailing, but I dropped a sticky note on his desk. "Need your eyes on the payment rollback. 10 Manelas." He looked up, saw my face, and just said, "Yeah, war room." "Not yet. Quiet for now." 10 minutes later, I was back at the bench. My so-called desk. I opened Slack and pinged Aisha from analytics. "Me. Got a minute?" Aisha, if this is about the traffic dip, I already know. Seeing a spike in abandoned checkouts, 15% drop since last night. Me, how deep can you trace that? Aisha, already working on it. Give me a signal when you want it loud. Me, soon. We were assembling, quiet allies, people who'd seen too much smoke to pretend there wasn't a fire. At 10:03 a.m., Kara pinged me again. Kara, hey, my code's getting flagged in the staging pipeline. Do you think that's, bad? I didn't answer right away. I took a breath, then replied. Me, I think it means we need to work together. Sit with me. She showed up 5 minutes later with a Red Bull and a tablet full of TikToks. Sorry, she said, plopping into the chair across from me. This whole thing is a mess. That's not your fault, I said. It's a lack of structure. You weren't supposed to merge code alone. You don't even have a mentor. She looked embarrassed. Dan said it was fine, said I had good instincts. I didn't argue. I just nodded and opened the code again. We walked through her changes line by line. I showed her where the encryption helper broke rollback, where the CVE exposed the service, and where the tests had failed quietly. She didn't try to defend herself. That, at least, earned my respect. We patched it together. Under flags, every change wrapped in conditionals. No direct calls to prod, every step reversible. You get credit for this, I said, but it stays under supervision. She nodded. Deal. By 11:15 a.m., we had a clean test build. Marco queued it into staging behind a feature toggle. Liv signed off the regression scope. Aisha flagged the spike in drop-offs and tied it to failed sessions traced to the payments endpoint. All of it documented. All of it backed by logs. Dan hadn't said a word all morning, but I saw him watching. He didn't come near the bench, didn't ping me, just stayed in his little glass box, occasionally whispering with product. But I saw his fingers tapping the table. He knew. The code was turning. The team was forming. And the story he was planning, the story where I came back too early, too broken, and wrecked the release, was falling apart. He still had one weapon left, access control. But I had something stronger now. People, logs, receipts, and a plan. At 12:01 p.m. sharp, I opened a fresh document. I named it Release Recovery Plan V1.MD. But internally, I called it what it really was, the 48-hour counterstrike. It wasn't about saving my reputation anymore. This wasn't some office power move. This was risk containment. This was ethics. If this release went out in its current state, it wouldn't just tank KPIs. It could break payments for thousands of customers, leave personal data exposed, and sink trust that had taken 5 years to build. So I mapped the war plan. 0 tier 12 age, fix CVE and clean rollback. 12 tier 24 age, patch plus feature flag all unverified changes. 24 tier 36 age, run integration across all critical paths. 36 tier 48 age, full regression suite plus automated release deploy. It had to be tight, precise, no extra fluff, no meetings, just execution. By 12:09 p.m., I looped in my quiet allies, Liv, Marco, Aisha. I shared a private folder with the plan and a shared checklist where each of us could update in real time. No email, no Slack thread, just task, action, confirm. Aisha was first to respond. Aisha. Noticed drop-off clustering in iOS devices only. Might be a session auth timeout under newer builds. That gave us our first flank. The mobile SDK had version misalignment. I flagged it as a mid-priority issue and dropped it into the 2436-ish window. Liv chimed in next. Liv. Unit tests look clean, but Sandbox is throwing odd errors when logging payment retries. Marco responded seconds later. Marco. Looks like a duplicate session token isn't clearing. I'll set up a Sandbox trigger and trap it. We were moving like a real team now. No middle management, no stand-ups, no approval gates. just quiet, surgical progress. Kara showed up around 1 p.m., nervous, still holding on to guilt from the earlier merges. I didn't rub her nose in it. She already knew. Instead, I slid the dock over and pointed. "You're not locked out," I said. "You're part of this now. But every change goes through review. We're flagging everything." She bit her lip. "Dan said I should just keep pushing, that you'd get in the way. Then let's prove him wrong with code." For the next hour, we rewrote her modules behind feature flags. Everything she'd shipped got isolated under toggles, completely removable at runtime. I showed her how to write toggled logic that wouldn't rot the architecture, and she picked it up faster than I expected. By mid-afternoon, we had the rollback fixed, the CVE patched, and the payment service back to a stable state in staging, and that's when the dashboard lit up. Anomalies in prod pay core. Marco flagged it first. "Marco, we've got a live crash. Segmenting now. I dropped everything and launched the trace viewer. The crash was in a module tagged opt pay enhance v2. I checked the commit history, no review, no flag. Just a solo push from Kara's account, time-stamped 2 days ago outside the window we'd audited. It wasn't in the plan. It wasn't even listed in Jira." "Shit," I muttered. Liv leaned over. "Did we miss that one?" "No. It wasn't in the plan because Dan never logged it." I checked the Slack audit. Sure enough, Dan had manually overridden the branch protection and merged it from his local. He'd tagged it with a comment. "Quick performance win. Skip review for now. I'll QA myself." But he never did. He'd pushed unreviewed optimization straight into the live payment module, and now it was crashing. We isolated the call, pulled a traffic sample, and dropped it into a sandbox. The crash triggered under a specific load pattern when 3 or more simultaneous checkouts hit the processor in under 200 milliwrists. The enhancement Dan had added removed the debounce logic. He'd optimized away our rate limiter. I didn't say anything, just pulled open Slack and posted the error trace directly into Tor release war room, tagging it. "Live crash in prod traced to unreviewed merge in payments module. Isolated to commit 487C9A3. Working on hotfix, logs and traces below, no opinions, no drama, just the facts." Dan didn't reply. He didn't even react. But 5 minutes later, I saw him start removing himself from channels. That told me everything I needed to know. By 6 p.m., we had the hotfix pushed. We re-added the debounce logic under a dynamic flag. No downtime. The graph began to level. Aisha messaged, "Aisha, checkout drop-offs returning to baseline. Looks like we stopped the bleeding." I didn't smile. I didn't feel relief. I felt rage. Not because of the bug, but because Dan had tried to let me take the fall for his unreviewed merge. If we hadn't caught it, and that crash hit the post-mortem, he would have pointed the finger straight at me. I was back after all. Easy target. She jumped in and broke things. So I updated the timeline. 4:46 p.m. Crash in prod pay core traced to commit 487C9A3. Commit owner, Dan Hart prod. No peer review, no test plan, no feature flag. Merged manually using admin override. I attached the error trace, logs, Slack link, and dashboard snapshots. This wasn't just about recovery anymore. This was about proof. Receipts that would survive the post-mortem. Evidence no one could scrub. At 8:12 p.m., Marco deployed the latest build to pre-prod. Green lights across the board. Tests passed. Feature flags isolated the entire risk scope. Payments were processing clean. I leaned back, letting the fluorescent lights buzz overhead. We were halfway there. Next came integration, then regression, and then the reckoning. The war room went live at 11:03 p.m., not because anyone announced it, but because the moment the last flag passed pre-prod, we all knew. This was now a bridge. And bridges don't sleep. The quiet hum of the office shifted. Screens lit up like terminal stars. Chairs rolled closer. Terminal windows multiplied. People lowered their voices like they were stepping into a cathedral. We were in deployment posture. The air was different at night. No managers pacing. No HR lurking near the coffee machine. Just engineers, raw and focused. It was the hour when truth shows its face in logs and latency charts. We kicked things off with a single rule: no change without visibility. That meant everything went through the war room channel. Every push, every flag, every rollback, all with receipts. Marco posted the bridge pin, a live Notion board with every step logged, time-stamped, and linked to the updated timeline. Liv posted the current test coverage. Aisha mapped the traffic deltas since last deploy. Kara just sat there quietly beside me, watching, learning. I assigned her a shadow task: watch flag toggles and report any traffic anomalies in under 2 minutes. She nodded fast, chewing the end of a pen. At 11:37 p.m., we went hunting for the vulnerable module, the one Dan's optimization had tried to enhance. We found it sitting in core pay, still wired to live endpoints under a commit that had skipped review. Marco traced the call stack, confirming the issue. Dan had replaced the legacy rate limiter with a new thread pool handler, but forgot to include token validation. That wasn't just sloppy. That was dangerous. No one spoke as we unhooked it. Liv dropped a stub module behind a feature flag. Marco patched the handler with a wrapper, restoring compatibility. I wrote the test, Kara reviewed it, and Liv ran it against a sandboxed clone of prod. We moved in silence, heads down, cursors darting, every person doing exactly what they were best at. Then it hit. 12:11 a.m. Prod alerts lit up, again. Not from our work, from a different module. Something else had just started throwing 502s across the checkout chain. I toggled over to the logs. It was coming from a push labeled Session Chuck Patch V3. I blinked. That was not one of ours. Marco's eyes met mine from across the desk. You seeing this? Yeah. We traced it. The comment had come from a shadow branch. Not in the release plan, not tagged, no Jira, no Slack message. Just a quiet little commit, merged 15 minutes before the war room went live. Owner, Dart Prod, Dan. He had snuck one more patch in, likely before his merge rights got flagged for lockout. It had gone live, and now it was breaking session handling. I hit Slack. Alert, live 502s in Session Manager. Traced to shadow commit from Dart Prod, merged outside bridge scope. Pulling down now. Marco reverted it. Fast. We sandboxed the failure. Found the cause, an invalid session store refresh that was firing under expired tokens. Dan had rewritten the call to skip expiry checks. Probably chasing speed again. Probably didn't test under load. Aisha posted the customer impact, 17% spike in checkout abandonment in the last 30 minutes. Mostly mobile. Liv dropped her keyboard on the desk. This is sabotage. I didn't reply. I just opened the timeline and wrote, 12:14 a.m. Unscheduled commit from Dart Prod causes 502s in prod. Not part of release plan. No ticket. No review. Mitigated in 7 minutes. Impact window confirmed. Logs, plus rollback link attached. Marco glanced over. He's trying to make it look like the pipeline is unstable. Too late for that, I said. We've got a record now. And that's when I realized something. Facts weren't enough. We needed proof that couldn't be argued with. Not a wiki, not a Slack thread. Something permanent, immutable. I opened a private chat with Marco. Me. You free to help me trap history? Marco. I like the sound of that. Me. I want to generate a running PDF of the timeline, with cryptographic hashes. If anyone tries to edit it later, the hash changes. Marco: hell yes. I'll set up a bot to update every 30 minutes. Each version gets a hash. We built it right there in the war room. Exported the current timeline as a PDF. SHA 256 hashed it. Pinned it to the top of the channel with a description: immutable timeline. All bridge decisions, logs, merges, and events do not alter. Hash confirms integrity. Every 30 minutes, a new version, a new hash, a permanent fingerprint of what happened, when, and who touched it. Liv looked up when we posted the first pin. You're building a trap. No, I said. I'm building a mirror. One no one can lie to. From that moment on, the energy shifted. Everyone knew the logs were watching. Even Kara started double-checking her test notes before posting. Every flag got a link. Every merge had a commit hash. Every post started with the timestamp. It was cleaner than any bridge I'd ever run. By 2:17 a.m., we had stabilized everything. Payments were running clean. Sessions were holding steady. Mobile fallback was back online. Database writes were error-free. And rollback points? Locked and ready. Regression window was clean. Green bars across the board. Kara leaned back and whispered, "Is it always like this?" "No," I said. "Most teams run bridges with someone taking credit and someone else taking blame. This one's about truth." She nodded, quiet. Dan never joined the bridge, never pinged, never posted. But I saw his Slack status go yellow, then red, then disappear. And the timeline watched it all. There's something surgical about trapping the truth in a way that even its enemies can't argue with. That's what the timeline had become. Not a story, not a complaint, but a mathematical artifact. One that couldn't be altered, distorted, or softened by politics. At 3:03 a.m., Marco's bot pushed the first hash-stamped version of the timeline PDF into the channel. SHA 256 fingerprint pinned in Slack. Updated every half hour with a new, immutable version. If a single character changed, even a period, the hash would break. And that would be public. Transparent. Permanent. By 3:05 a.m., no one was guessing anymore. No one was assuming or interpreting. Every move had a receipt. Every delay had a name. Every push, pull, and roll back had a timestamp and a link. And behind it all was the timeline, like a black box recorder on a doomed flight. Except this time, we weren't crashing. We were proving. I called it the trap matrix. Because now, no one could rewrite what had happened. And that terrified Dan more than any Slack message I could ever send. By 3:22 a.m., the PDF showed 11:37 p.m., bridge initiated, 12:11 a.m., live crash traced to unreviewed merge, 12:14 a.m., unauthorized commit caused 502s, 12:21 a.m., rollback executed, crash mitigated, 2:17 a.m., all core modules stabilized, green across tests. Every entry had log links, file diffs, Slack post timestamps, and commit hashes. It wasn't just code anymore, it was evidence. And that evidence had teeth. At 4 a.m., I pushed the hash to the internal BOF compliance log channel. Just the hash. No explanation, no accusation, just a quiet message. Verified release timeline available. See War Room pin for current state. Legal saw it. So did HR. So did the VP. And suddenly the silence around Dan got louder. At 8:17 a.m., the release window opened. Green lights across all CI systems. Liv posted test completion. Marco initiated the final regression pass. Aisha signed off on the analytics flag triggers. Kara, quietly, submitted her final toggle request with me on review. I approved it. Every single step was recorded. No one moved without metadata. Dan tried one last move. At 9:04 a.m., he submitted a Slack message for a product release. Shout out to the whole team. Big win getting this release ready on short notice. Special thanks to Kara for pushing through the last-minute fixes. It was carefully worded. No mention of the fire. No acknowledgement of the crash. Just soft PR sleight of hand. It was the kind of move managers make when they're trying to own the narrative before someone else does. I waited 30 seconds. Then I posted the PDF. Attached, final immutable timeline for 6.348 includes commit logs, access restrictions, timeline of events, recovery actions, and author attributions. Hash verified, metadata available in version history. And I pinned it. Dan's post stayed on top for a few minutes. Then the tide turned. Reactions gathered under the timeline. No comments, only eyes and checks, plus one fire from a security engineer. The narrative had shifted. The PDF was our weapon, but it wasn't a sword. It was a mirror. A cold, reflective surface showing everyone exactly what had happened and who had done what. By 9:27 a.m., Dan locked his account. That's not a metaphor. His Dart prod credentials were suspended pending investigation. I got the alert from SecOps, not public, just a quiet ping. Heads up. User access under review. We saw the timeline. Strong work. At 9:42 a.m., legal requested a read-only copy of the PDF and its hash chain. At 9:58 a.m., HR scheduled a formal debrief. By 10:30 a.m., a calendar invite landed in my inbox. Subject, release post-mortem, mandatory attendees, VP, legal, HR, product, QA, engineering required presenter. Your name. Date, tomorrow. 9 a.m. No subjectivity, no agendas. Just show us what happened. That's what the timeline had done. It hadn't just trapped Dan, it had dismantled the company's usual blame games. The whole culture of hiding behind best efforts and alignment issues couldn't breathe inside a room full of receipts. At 11 a.m., I walked past Dan's glass office. Empty. Not just empty. Stripped. Nameplate gone. Whiteboard wiped. Chair still turned sideways like someone had stood up in a hurry and never came back. That chair used to represent authority. Now it looked like an escape pod. Kara passed by me with a coffee in hand. She didn't say anything at first, just nodded, then paused. You could have thrown me under the bus, she said. But you didn't. You weren't the problem, I said. You were a symptom. The system failed you before you ever opened your laptop. She smiled, a little embarrassed. Still, thanks. I didn't answer. We both knew this wasn't over, but the board was set. And tomorrow, when the post-mortem began, I wasn't going in with feelings. I was going in with math. Ownership. That word carries weight. It decides who gets credit, who takes the hit, and, when the walls close in, who gets left behind. The post-mortem started at 9:01 a.m. the next morning, exactly as scheduled. No small talk, no introductions, just the VP at the head of the table, legal counsel on his right, HR on his left, and the head of product already scrolling through the timeline before I even spoke a word. Let's begin, the VP said. Walk us through what happened. I didn't bring a PowerPoint. I brought the timeline. The immutable timeline was projected on the screen. A PDF filled with log events, timestamps, commit hashes, Slack messages, screenshots, and every single mistake, mine included, tied to a traceable action. I didn't perform. I didn't dramatize. I just told the truth. When I returned from medical leave, I began, I discovered my desk reassigned, my Jira epics renamed, and my push rights revoked. The work I was responsible for had been passed off to an intern without supervision. Can you speak to that intern's role? HR asked. She was enthusiastic and completely unsupported. She wasn't the issue. The issue was the lack of oversight. Interns require mentorship. Instead, she was pushed to production alone. I clicked to a section of the timeline. Commit 423, the encryption mismatch, the rollback failure, the CVE. Code was merged without review. Features were released without flags. Payment services crashed twice, both from unauthorized or unsupervised pushes. One of them under Kara's account, the other directly from Dan's admin override. The VP raised an eyebrow. You're saying Dan pushed to prod outside the release plan? I'm not saying it. The hash log is. I clicked again. Commit 487C9A3, the failed optimization, 502 as a 7-minute impact window, restored rollback, Liv's regression sign-off, Aisha's analytics trace. Legal leaned in. This hash, it's cryptographically secure. SHA 256, updated every 30 minutes by automated bot. Each version is archived. Any alteration breaks the chain. They nodded. They knew what that meant. No plausible deniability. The room stayed quiet. I pulled up the Slack message from Dan, dated 2 days before my return. If this tanks, we say she barged in fresh off sick leave. The VP narrowed his eyes. Dan wrote that? Yes. Out of context? Legal can confirm. Context is on the next page. They scrolled. Slack thread intact. No redactions. Then came the kicker. I pulled up the RACI matrix, a chart I built overnight showing responsibility, accountability, consultation, and informed roles for the release. Under responsible, I was removed manually by Dan during my leave. Under accountable, he had listed himself. Under informed, no one, because no one was actually informed. The silence grew heavier. Finally, the VP leaned back. What would you have done differently? He asked. I wouldn't have come back early, I said, but I also wouldn't have assumed that structure existed when it clearly didn't. So I built one, with logs, with receipts, with people who showed up. He nodded. Do you hold the intern responsible? No, but I made sure her code was flagged and quarantined, not to hide it, but to learn from it. Every mistake is now documented and turned into a training module. If we're going to bring in junior talent, we owe them actual mentorship. HR tapped notes. Legal clicked through hash logs. Product said nothing. Then the VP cleared his throat. Dan has been reassigned to internal tooling, effective immediately. No leadership access, no frontline repos, no hiring authority. He will not have override rights for future releases. I didn't react. I already knew. The timeline, he continued, will become part of our release protocol. Immutable records, audit logs, signed hashes. We'll make this standard. And then he looked at me directly. I'd like you to draft a new ownership model. That was it. No applause. No celebration. Just a quiet acknowledgement that the person they tried to erase had documented everything, rebuilt the process, and proved the failure wasn't about ego or feelings, it was about structure. And now I was being asked to build the next one. Outside the room, I found Kara sitting on the edge of her desk, nervously scrolling. She looked up, eyes wide. How bad was it? I sat beside her. It was honest. Am I still part of the team? You are, I said. But you're not unsupervised anymore. You're going to shadow QA for 2 weeks. Then sit with DevOps. Then we'll pair program through one more release. She nodded slowly. I can live with that. Good, I said. Because next time, when you ship code, you'll know exactly what part of the house it can burn down. Her smile was thin, but real. Before I walked away, I left a sticky note on her monitor. Mandatory mentorship. Owner, Kara. Across the office, Dan passed by. He didn't look at me, just swiped his badge at the DevOps wing and disappeared behind a door that no longer opened for strategy meetings. He was still inside the system, but not in charge of it anymore. The timeline made sure of that. 44 hours in, and we made it. The release was live. No red flags, no alerts, just quiet success. Systems stable, payments running smooth, sessions solid. Not a single rollback needed. After everything we'd been through, the silence felt unreal. Liv gave the green light first. All tests passed. Nothing's bleeding. Marco confirmed deployment was clean. Prods locked, everything holding. And Aisha? Customer flows back to normal. Even a bit better. Cleaner conversions than last week. Even Kara checked in. Nervous, but proud. My toggle went live. No errors. I double-checked every trace. There were no cheers. Just a string of check marks in the war room thread. Quiet respect. The kind that comes after surviving a storm. And behind it all, the timeline. That PDF we'd built like a shield. One log at a time, one receipt after another. Versioned, sealed, immutable, no edits, no spin. Just truth, backed by math. At 9 a.m. sharp, I filed the official post-mortem. No sugarcoating, no blaming the intern. Just the story as it happened. I wrote about how my work had been reassigned during medical leave, how an intern, left unsupervised, had been handed critical systems, how 2 crashes had hit production, and how we fixed them, fast, precisely, and publicly. I didn't hide the mistakes. I named them, because hiding failure only ensures it happens again. At the bottom of the post-mortem, I wrote something simple. Ownership isn't about titles. It's about showing up. If no one owns the risk owns all of us. I hit send, made it public. No gatekeeping. It spread fast. Dev teams shared it, product teams pinned it. Security reached out to thank us for the hash system. Even a couple VPs dropped emojis in the thread. Around midday, the VP called a follow-up. No agenda. Just one question. How do we make sure this never happens again? I was ready. I proposed a new system. One where every key role had a clear backup. One where interns couldn't push to production without a mentor beside them. One where every big release had its own public timeline, just like ours. No more guessing. No more finger pointing. The VP nodded. Roll it out this quarter. Legal added, we'll put it into policy. This changes how we work. And just like that, what started as my defense became a blueprint. When I got back to my desk, my real one, with my access restored and my name back where it belonged, I found my inbox full. Can we learn how to run a timeline? Can you mentor one of our new engineers? Can we borrow your checklist for our next bridge? 3 days ago, I was invisible. Now, I was setting the standard. At 3:45, Kara stopped by. They're keeping me, she said. I looked at her and nodded. Good. But this time, you're not going in alone. She hesitated, then asked quietly, do you think I deserve it? Not yet, but you will. That's what learning looks like. She smiled, small but honest. And Dan? She asked. Moved to internal tooling, no team, no production access. She didn't say more. She didn't need to. We'd both seen what happens when people grab power without responsibility. That chapter was closed. Back in the war room, the timeline still sat pinned. 17 pages, dozens of events, 0 edits. It didn't shout. It didn't accuse. It just stood there, a quiet monument to what really happened. And this time, no one could erase it. The conference room was colder than usual, not because of the air, but because of what was about to happen. Everyone was there, VP, legal, HR, product, QA, even a silent rep from compliance in the corner. No one touched their coffee. I walked in with one thing in my hand, the timeline, printed, bound, hash stamped on the cover. This wasn't a meeting. It was a reckoning. The VP began without pleasantries. We're here to understand what went wrong during the release cycle and how it was fixed. I nodded once. I'll walk you through the whole chain. What happened, why it happened, and who made it better. I didn't waste time. I started with the first block, how I returned from medical leave to find my access removed, my work reassigned, and my role effectively deleted without explanation. I told them how the intern, Kara, had been left unsupervised to push directly to production, and how Dan had quietly removed review protections on critical modules. Then I opened the timeline. Page by page, I showed them the crash logs, the commits, the bypassed flags, the Slack messages, the audit trails, all of it. Not just what failed, but the why behind it. HR asked, "Were you consulted at all before your role was reassigned?" "No," I said. "I was on medical leave. Policy states role changes require documented handoff. There was none." Legal leaned forward. "And Dan?" I flipped the page. There it was. Dan's Slack message. "Park yourself on the bench. Don't make your sick leave our problem." The room went quiet. The VP asked, "Are those his words?" I didn't have to answer. Legal did. They are. Verified in the unbroken hash chain. Context preserved in full thread. The VP turned to the product director. "Did you authorize the intern's promotion to release access?" He shook his head. "No, I assumed Dan had coverage in place." "He didn't," I said, "and she got blamed for his merge. We caught it before it caused a full outage, but not before customers felt it." I didn't twist the knife, just let the facts speak. Then I showed them what we did differently. The war room structure, the hash-linked timeline, real-time tracking of decisions, pair reviews, recovery within minutes. We didn't fix the release by chance. We built a system that couldn't lie. The VP looked down at the bound document, flipping slowly through it. "This timeline," he said. "No edits possible?" "None," I answered. "Change 1 comma, the hash breaks. It's permanent." HR asked the next question. "And what about Kara?" "She's staying," I said. "She'll be mentored. We already built a path for her to learn from what happened. She's not the villain. She's a product of a broken process, but she also stayed for the fix." The room settled into that. Even compliance nodded once. That was rare. Then the VP sat back and said the words I'd waited days to hear. "Dan Hart is being removed from all frontline decision-making roles, effective immediately. He'll move to internal tooling. No production access, no team leadership, no override rights, and no hiring privileges." No one argued, not even the product team, because the proof was in the pages, and the pages couldn't be rewritten. "We'll be adopting this timeline model for all red tag releases moving forward," the VP continued. "We're building this into policy, permanent." Legal added, "Ownership changes during leave must now go through documented review and sign-off, period." HR looked up. "We'll be revising intern policy too. Mentorship will be mandatory for production-level access." Then the VP looked at me directly. "We'd like you to design the mentorship structure and help train the next set of leads." I didn't say yes right away, because this wasn't about reward. It wasn't even about recognition. It was about correcting a system that had learned to erase people like me the moment we went quiet. Eventually, I said, "I'll do it, but only if we publish everything. No closed-door processes, no anonymous rewrites." "Agreed," the VP said. "Full transparency." When the meeting ended, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear, like something poisonous had finally been pulled out of the bloodstream. Back at my desk, I found Kara organizing a folder of regression tests. She looked up as I approached. "They're not mad?" "No," I said. "They're rebuilding the policy because of you." She blinked. "Me?" "Because of what we did right, after the fact." She nodded slowly, still carrying the weight of her mistakes, but now with something else in her posture. Intention. She wouldn't mess up like that again. Dan passed by later that afternoon, badge clipped to his belt, expression blank. He didn't meet my eyes, didn't say a word, just walked to his new desk. No glass walls, no intern at his side, no override keys. That was the consequence. Not revenge, accountability. By the end of the day, the timeline sat in 3 locations: the War Room pin, the Compliance Archive, and the new Mentoring Handbook. I never thought a simple PDF would change the course of a company, but it did. Because people lie. Logs don't. The new War Room didn't feel like the old one. The lights were calmer, the air quieter. There was no shouting across desks, no chaos on screens, no panicked scrolls through broken logs, just quiet confidence, like the room itself knew it had changed. I walked in that morning with my badge in one hand, coffee in the other. No adrenaline, no crisis, just a release window ahead and a team that finally understood what real ownership looked like. They'd done it. We'd all done it. The new process was live. Now, every critical release had a single War Room channel. Every decision was tracked. Every change had a name attached to it. And most important, everybody knew the rules. No more guesswork, no more disappearing blame. And then, right on cue, the message came in. Top of my inbox, straight from the VP's office. Subject line, credit reassignment, release 6.348. I opened it slowly, didn't even blink when I read the first line. After internal audit, we're correcting credit for the 6.348 release. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't dressed up, just a clear shift of recognition. My name back on my work. Kara listed as a contributor, with guidance noted, and Dan's unauthorized pushes called out, plain and direct. No debate, no sugar. It was public now. The story they tried to spin was gone, replaced by facts. I stared at the screen for a moment, then closed the tab. That was enough. No celebration, no revenge dance, just balance. Like something had finally clicked into place after grinding wrong for too long. Later that day, I got my final assignment. New War Room, clean space, updated systems, and one request: help build the next phase of mentorship. Document what worked, lock in what didn't. When I arrived, the lights were already on. The room looked different, glass panels with diagrams and roles sketched across them. A digital board in the center displayed the upcoming release cycle. In the corner, a single sentence had been printed across the glass. No one pushes alone. I smiled. Right below that line, in bold, was a name. Not mine. Kara's. She was listed as the new lead for intern mentorship. I hadn't known. I hadn't asked. But there it was, clear as day. She'd earned it. She walked through the fire, yes. But more importantly, she stayed. She learned. And she stepped forward when the moment came. I stepped up to the panel, took out a marker, and signed just beneath her name. Approval. Quiet. Permanent. Then came the sound behind me. A badge swipe. I turned slowly. Dan. He stood at the door, face tight, expression unreadable. He swiped once. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. The scanner blinked red. He looked up at me through the glass. No words, just the weight of it. The realization that the door wouldn't open. Not for him. Not anymore. He didn't argue, didn't knock. Just stood there, then turned and walked away. And I let him. Because this room wasn't about exclusion. It was about earned trust. It was about knowing who shows up when the fire hits. It was about building systems that remember what people try to forget. This wasn't revenge. This was policy. And this time, the lock clicked in my favor.